night I have no explanation for. I've always been somewhat of a skeptic, but I still to this day have no idea how something like that could have happened or even eventuated. It's just purely something that I
probably class as being supernatural. Simple as that. I was never really a spectacle of ghosts and stuff in my younger year. I mean, I used to watch horror movies with my family all the time. On a Friday night, Saturday night, all of that. But there were a couple of moments that really made me think and think just about ghosts and stuff, because a few moments during my childhood years, there were like spiritual stuff that happened to me. One story was when we were leaving to go to school with me, my brother and my mum. We checked the house, make sure everything was clean, locked the door and just went on our way to school and work. On the way home from work and school, we opened the door and I wanted to put my bag down in my room. So I walked to my bedroom and there were about 6 or 7 pots and pans lying perfectly aligned, evenly spaced on the floor next to my bedroom door.
In the corridor?
In the corridor, yes, leading to the kitchen. I was confused and worried about this. So I went to my mum and my brother and I told them, there's about 6 or 7 pots and pans just on the floor. Did you come home or do anything? And they said, no, they didn't come home at all. And I vividly remember my mum locking the door and checking all the locks, so there was no way anyone could have been in there. So that was one of the first moments that I realised...
Could the pots and pans have fallen over?
No, so the hallway was like a pretty large distance away from the kitchen. So there was no way that it could have fallen off any bench or a cupboard of any way. The shelves, anything like that. The doors to the cupboards were closed. So there was no way like anyone would have been in there, because they would have just like...
Somebody would have had to like pull them out.
Someone or something would have just pulled it out and just placed it on the floor, because they were placed evenly, just like spaced on the floor. Like it was too weird for it to not be
an accident.
An accident, yeah. Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity to share with you some experiences that I had in the past. In particular, going back to 2004. Now, back then, we were just lucky enough to move into a house that I could stay for a duration rent-free. Now, a part of the deal was to do a bit of work on the house until I saved up enough money to buy my own house. So at the time, my youngest Alexander was only maybe 2-3 weeks old, and didn't really matter what we did to the house. We put brand new wiring through it. There was new antenna. The TV didn't work. There was always an issue with the electricity. It was as if the house was jinxed. Now, didn't really think much of it at the time, but now in hindsight, when I think about it, there was not much more I could do to get that place, up to scratch. However, this particular night, it would have been around 9 o'clock, I'd say, maybe 10 o'clock at night. And we sat down, and the only channel we had was an ABC channel that really didn't need an antenna. So
we sat down and we started watching whatever we could watch. Now, Alexander was in his cot, so we had some stuff down on the table, and I remember there was a dummy on the table. But before I saw what happened to the dummy, it as if someone had flicked the dummy off the table and it skidded onto the floor up to the skirting board. But prior to that, we heard an almighty scream come from the room as if Alexander had been pinched, or whether he was in some sort of pain, like a baby in discomfort. So my wife and I both shot up, opened the door, turned the light on, and it was as if nothing had happened. It was like he was sound asleep. There was no discomfort or anything. We both looked at each other and said, "What the hell has just happened?"
When I was growing up, my mum used to tell us all these stories about, when she was a kid, and they had this house just up the road around the corner in Granville, and it had 2 stories. It was abandoned, and these glowing lights and all that, and it was always kid fantasy sort of stories. There was anything to it. We never really believed it. And then my missus and I at the time, back in the late 80s, moved into a house up in Bathurst, a little place called Raglan. It was just out of town there. And we moved onto this little farm, sort of a block, and it had been built like 1901. And at the time when we moved in, there was an old lady who'd lived there who died. And we didn't think too much of it. We thought she'd gone to hospital and died and, whatever else. And it completely changed my opinion on paranormal activity after that. We moved into this place, and I had this beautiful black lab, it was the most placid thing in the world. One minute we'd be sitting there just watching television, and next minute he'd pick his head up, and he'd be looking around and barking at something just when there was nothing there. Or you'd be out in the yard just working by yourself, and all of a sudden you'd feel this really cold sensation, and it'd get really freezing. And it kind of changed my opinion of paranormal activity completely. So I was at home one night by myself, and I'd climbed into bed, just finished work that night, and I was just dog tired. It wasn't real late, it was like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And I closed the whole house up, and I closed the door, and I climbed into bed, and I was reading for a little while, and I was just kind of going off to sleep. Next minute I heard a noise, and I sat up in bed, and the door between the bedroom and the lounge room had opened. I know it was closed when I went to bed, and it had opened 8-10 inches, so 250 mil. And there was a light, and it's really hard to describe. Now, the easiest way for me to explain it is, in the old days when we used to go prawning, we had these kerosene lamps, and they used to light up just kind of a bit of a yellow area around themselves. And this light went from one side of the lounge room across the door, and as if it was going off out between the lounge room and the room behind. And I went, there's got to be someone here. So I jumped out of bed, and I walked over to the door, and I opened the door up, and it occurred to me there couldn't be anybody there. I didn't hear anybody come in. The house was completely locked up. It was completely closed up. It was completely dark. The room was completely dark. There was nothing there. There was nobody there. And I thought, it's got to have been a car come past. And I checked the windows. The doors are all closed. The curtains were all closed. And the doors between the 2 rooms, between the lounge room and the dining room, was closed. And I went, that's just freaky, I cannot explain it. I went from a complete skeptic to, hey, there could be something there that we don't know about, because I can't explain it now. I wasn't able to explain it then, and I don't know that I ever will be able to. It was completely freaky.
do remember we also had a friend who came over. My wife's or my in-laws' neighbour, Marilyn. She was the type of person who bought houses and fixed them up, and then she passed them on and made profit that way. So we thought we'd call her over to get a few ideas on what we should do with the property that we were in. So we sat down to have some dinner, and over the dinner table, it's actually this table. I was sitting pretty much where I am now, and Marilyn was directly in front of me. And when you're trying to tell a story to someone and you're looking, and you know, they're kind of looking over your shoulder, and it makes you feel a little bit uneasy. Well, that's what Marilyn was doing. So I kind of said to her, I said, Marilyn, I said, are you listening to what I'm saying? And she said, oh yeah. She says, I am. She goes, keep going. She goes, I understand what you're saying. And I said, well, you're not. I said, you're making me feel uncomfortable. I said, why are you looking over my shoulder? She goes, oh, they want to hear what's going on as well. And I said, what do you mean they want to hear what's going on as well? She goes, oh, that's okay. There's a man and a boy that want to hear what you're saying as well. She goes, it's all good. Just carry on like nothing's happened. Of course I couldn't. So, just things like that. The fact that the house didn't really want to be fixed was an alarm bell for me. The dummy that sporadically flew off the table in front of my eyes. Alexander screaming at night on inspection. Sleeping like an angel. Marilyn's encounter with the people behind me. That particular experience made me believe that there may very well be something else, paranormal activity, if you like.
There's another story I have as well, where I was just getting ready to go to school. It was me, my mum, and my grandma in the house at this time, and I was just getting ready for school in my room. And while I was getting ready, I locked the door. I closed the door behind me, not locked, sorry. And the room was all quiet, besides like a faint wind outside. And as I was getting ready, I heard a faint woman humming, almost like a song, like a little tune. So I quickly turned around, just to see if my mum or my grandma walked into my room. There was no one there. The door was still closed. Weirded out, I just started putting on my clothes again, thinking that it was like the TV or something. They must have turned the TV up. But then the same humming came again, the same voice, in the same tone and the same song, same tune. And at this point, my heart started to race. I was just like, what is this noise? So as a little kid, I got onto the floor into a position and just started crying. I was too weirded out and scared by it. And obviously my mum and my grandma wanted to check up on me because I was taking a long time. So they opened the door and they found me on the floor crying. And of course they were worried, so they picked me up, took me into the living room and told me, why were you on the floor crying? And I told them what happened, the humming. And they were weirded out by it as well. Because my mum also experienced that humming as well, so she knew exactly what I was going off.
Now, I'll warn you, I'll get emotional during this.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're all sweet with using it still.
I don't mind, you use it for everything you like. So the story goes like this. Back in the mid-80s, I was working as a plant mechanic. I was fixing cherry pickers and scissor lifts for a hire company. And one Saturday morning I went into work and I had to service a cherry picker. This is one of those trailer ones, and it has a boom that comes up like that and has a bucket. It was an insulated machine, so it's all fiberglass around the outside, fiberglass bucket, so it's supposed to be completely insulated. Well, I put the thing in the air and I was working on it, and I was looking down at the controls, and I was going left and right, concentrating on what was happening with the machine, and one of the valves was over centering, and it was letting fluid go past, so the machine was what we call creeping. It was slewing sideways. So I'm up in the air looking down like that, and the machine is slewing, and what I didn't realise was it was slewing closer and closer to some power lines that were running down across the side of where I was working. And I hit my head on the power line, and the electricity went in through my head, and it went out through both my index fingers, down through the controls and to the ground. And as a reaction, of course, you know, your muscles contract, and I've gone like that, and I actually hit the power line with my arm, and it's pushed into the wrist on this side and into this wrist side, into the side of my head, took the side of my ear, and it pushed against my head. And at that point, the electricity's then gone through my heart and stopped my heart, and I fell down inside the bucket. So I'm like 25 feet off the ground, and I'm literally dead in the bucket in the air. And I've been working with this guy, Steve, a mate of mine, Steve Goodwin, lovely bloke. And he was walking up this driveway. Now the driveway at this place was really long. It's like 200, 250 metres, and he reckons like 100, 150 metres up the driveway, and he stopped for no reason at all. He still doesn't know why. He was like literally 150 metres up the driveway, and he's turned around and come back, hit the emergency release, opened it up, brought the machine down on the ground. And one of the fellas I worked with, Dave Steen, who's, mate, the best way to describe him was an angry sack of walnuts. You know, the guy was a bodybuilder, he was strong as an ox, you know, like absolutely fit as. He's walked past at exactly an hour late walking into work, and probably the only bloke at work strong enough to lift me out of the bucket. Anyway, he's reached into the bucket and he's literally grabbed me and dragged me out, put me on the ground, laid me out on the ground, and the boss came over and he went, they're trying to figure out what to do, and the boss has gone, oh, he's fucked, you know, there's nothing you can do, he's dead. And my mates just grabbed him and said, fuck off, idiot, pushed him out of the road. And got down on the ground, and he didn't know how to do resuscitation or anything. And by this stage, you know, there's smoke coming out of my hair and out of my overalls, and you know, my face is all peely and red and looked like shit. So he did, and he reckons I was foaming at the mouth and stuff. So he went, you know, he wasn't going to do mouth to mouth, but he just started pumping on my chest. So he's pumping on my chest, and they got an ambulance. And the first ambulance turned up, but they didn't have a defibrillator. It was back in the day before Kerry Packer had his heart attack, and they bought defibrillators for all the ambulances. The ambulance guy, one started putting the bag on my face and pushing the air into my lungs, and they left my mate still pumping on my chest. And the other ambulance officers got on the radio and he called for backup, and they had an intensive care ambulance had finished a job around the corner, literally like just around the corner. And they packed the ambulance up and they were ready to head back to the depot. And they came flying around the corner apparently, and they had a defibrillator, and they jump-started me and put me in the ambulance and started taking me to hospital at Blacktown. Anyway, I got halfway between where I was and the Blacktown hospital, and I had a heart attack. And they pulled over on the side of the road, jump-started me again. So at this stage I've been dead twice. And they got me started again and took me to Westmead Hospital. It was a Saturday morning. They wheeled me into Westmead Hospital, and they had a doctor on duty, a VMO called Dr. Neil Trelfall. And at the time he was one of the leading microsurgeons in Australia. Like, this is Saturday morning and he's one of the leading microsurgeons in Australia. And I got him as my doctor. Anyway, they put me into intensive care for a few weeks because they had to let the electrocution burns come out, and then they rebuilt everything. They put everything back together, both hands, and did some repair on the nerves, put my face back together and healed up, and then they sent me off, and a few other things happened and a few other operations and stuff to put me back together. But by and large, most of my stuff all works, and I survived. Physically, obviously, emotionally, it's one of those things. It's been over 35 years now, and it's still one of those things that plays on your head when you have conversations about it. The number one question I always got was, did you see the light when you died? Did you go off and, was there a tunnel? Was there this, big cave thing you go through and you find the light? Was there friends there or anything? And the answer was, look, there's nothing. There was nothing. I didn't notice a thing. I didn't see a thing. I didn't feel a thing. I remember people yelling at me. I remember them sticking needles in my arm. I remember when they wheeled me out of the ambulance at Westmead, and I kind of remember some conversations in between, but nothing else. Like, there was no light, there was no nothing. So I became very kind of fatalistic and very sceptical about whether or not there's stuff on the other side. I didn't believe in anything paranormal. I just went, you're here, that's it, you're gone. Over the years, I've come to understand a bit more about it, and I come to think, well, maybe, I don't know, there might be something. And I say that because there was absolutely no need for Steve to stop on the driveway. Like, he was just focused on where he was going, and he was going out to a job. But he had this overwhelming feeling that something was wrong and that he had to come back and help me out. Dave was walking into work at exactly an hour late, and he's the only guy that was probably not only strong enough, but probably stubborn enough to actually go, yeah, no, fuck this, I'm going to make sure it works. We had, the first ambulance turns up, they didn't have a defibrillator, but when they get on the radio, there's a defibrillator in one that's just finished a job up the road. I start going to one hospital where they wouldn't have been able to treat me properly, and I wouldn't have been as good as I am, and I end up at the right hospital at the right time with exactly the right person. Like, there was nobody in Australia that was more qualified to put me back together to the point where I was going to be able to function properly. So there was too many coincidences that occurred for something really, in hindsight, not to be driving it. If you actually tried to calculate the odds for all of those things happening, you'd have to go, it's pretty unlikely that would have occurred and that you would have survived, And since then, I lost a guy I was in kindergarten with, Charlie Abigail, one of the loveliest guys in the world, top bloke. He got electrocuted at a chrome platers, and he was dead at 21. And Brady Hunter, who's a friend of my parents' son and a friend of mine, like, he was a top bloke, he got killed on power lines in Queensland. Working on the power lines, and a transformer blew up, and they didn't have anywhere near the luck or the series of coincidences that I had and the opportunities that I had. So, I think in some way there was something that led me on the path that I'm on, that kind of made all those things fall into place. So, and I think one of the things that turned me around to the idea of there being something else was that experience that I had in Bathurst. I thought there was nothing there, there's no way. And then I had that experience in Bathurst, and I went, well, there's some stuff there that we don't understand, that we can't grasp, that we can't put our handle on, that doesn't make sense, that is being influenced by something that we can't actually see or control. And I kind of went, well, if that's the case, then I have to be a bit more sceptical about the other side of it, and I have to appreciate that there could be something else going on that I'm not aware of.
Yeah. So, the accumulation of, life experiences that just couldn't be a coincidence. Made you more skeptical.
Too many things happened in my life over time that lead me to believe that there's something else going on, It's like that old thing, you think of somebody and all of a sudden they pop up the next day, or you hear a phone call, or you have a conversation about them, I just did it the other day with a fella. I was having a conversation and he came up in conversation, and then 2 days later somebody asked me if I knew the same guy, and I hadn't spoken about him for 18 years, 19 years, So there's too many coincidences, and coincidences, I don't know, they're not random, I don't think, anymore.
Would you say they changed you from a skeptic?
I believe that they did change me from a skeptic, because even to now, I still believe that ghosts do have the ability to interact with us and mess with us in a way that could make us scared or frightened. The woman humming, for example, it wasn't in the tone of my mum or my grandma's voice or anything on the TV, and I believe that those were like life-changing pivotal points that made me believe that ghosts are real.